Good morning, y'all. I'm gonna be honest. I am having kind of a hellish day. I'm currently functioning on about 2 hours of sleep. I woke up at 3:44 this morning, and cut 6 inches off my hair. Um, I have so far today consumed 2 scoops of coffee flavored ice cream because I thought it would have caffeine in it, and I didn't have the energy to make coffee. Discovered that said ice cream does not, in fact, contain caffeine, and have had a pot of tea. So we're really thriving this morning. So if the energy seems a little weird, figured I'd let you know. That's what we're working with today. So, good morning, Cassidy. Good morning, Marcy. Welcome to stream. Um, I have good news. I have figured out um the situation with the YouTube uploads. So, thank you. I really appreciate the sympathy. Um, I'm just having a time. It's I re- I also remembered to take my ADHD medication about 5 minutes ago. So, we're we're gonna be a little bouncy for a while. That may last just the entire time because again, sleep deprivation. Ah, fuck. Also, did you know that when you're lacking sleep, your what's it called? Proprioception. Your proprioception is worse. So your sense of where your body is in space is typically worse when you have gotten less sleep. Um, I'm gonna go grab a napkin, and then we will actually get to the topic of what we are doing today. Um, oh god. Everything's fine. Nothing's falling. We're all good. On the upside, I think the haircut worked pretty well. Like, you can't, I mean, it's in a ponytail right now, I guess, but can't tell that I did it myself at 3:44 this morning when I decided I was sick of my split ends. We're actually just gonna keep this napkin over here. Napkin, kitchen towel, all the same thing, really. Okay, where are we? Where are we? Oh yeah. So what we're doing today is we are going. Yesterday we went over some vocab, and so today, in our cybersecurity journey, which you can see the whole schedule for over here, in our cybersecurity journey today we are going to be doing a reading from the first chapter of Mark, I guess, actually of Casey, of Parker. We're going to be reading the first chapter of Parker. Um, or portions of it. Um, so with and if we wind up having extra time, straight up, I'm gonna read my favorite story about like origins of dragons. Cause I think it would be fun and it's vaguely related. And I like fun stories. Um, just depends on how much time we have at the end of class today. Class. At the end of stream today. Um, okay, let's get it pulled up. I also like dragons. Oh, didn't actually hit the button. There we go. Haha. So let's actually do the about section. So here's the page. Laha. Waha ha ha ha. Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, a step-by-step guide to computer security and privacy for non-techies. 5th edition by Carrie Parker. Published by A Press. Dedication to my mother, my father, and my daughters. And we're going to jump down to about the author. About the author. Cary Parker was born and raised in Indiana, an only child who loved to tear apart his electronic toys and reassemble them in interesting ways. He began programming computers in middle school when personal computers were just starting to become popular. For years, these twin interests percolated until he attended Purdue University and learned that you could get paid to do this stuff. It was called electrical engineering, EE. After obtaining a bachelor's and master's degree in EE, Cary launched his career in telecommunications software development at Bell Northern Research, aka the Big Nerd Ranch. Over the next 28 years, Cary wrote software for multiple companies, large and small, and lived in various cities across the southern United States. In recent years, particularly after the Edward Snowden revelations in 2013, he became deeply concerned about computer security and online privacy. In 2014, he combined his passion for computers, cybersecurity, and fantasy novels with a long-time desire to write a book. Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. As of October 2020, Cary has retired from the rat race of the 40-hour workweek and is now focused on educating as many people as possible about cybersecurity and personal privacy through his book. Aw, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Eclectic Library. And is now focusing on educating as many people as possible about cybersecurity and personal privacy through his book, blog, podcast, newsletter, seminars, and public speaking. Next, on to the technical reviewer. About the technical reviewer. Now semi-retired, Dean Keith is an adjunct instructor teaching technology classes for senior citizens at Dallas College in Dallas, Texas. A popular class Dean teaches is a computer security class using this book. He also teaches classes on how to use an iPhone, Windows 10, and Microsoft 365. Dean and Kathy have 2 adult daughters who still periodically ask him for help with technology. While attending Rutgers College in the early 1970s, when the faculty did recognize computer science as a legitimate degree, Dean was approved for an individualized major with courses from computer science major at Livingston College, which was part of Rutgers University, and the economics major at Rutgers. Having grown up in a military family and attending 3 different high schools in 3 parts of the country, Dean and Kathy settled in Texas after he served 4.5 years in the USAF. Moving from Aviano, Italy to Texas was a bit of a culture shock, but the weather there is much warmer than it is during those 4 years at Glasgow Air Force Base in Montana. As the years went by, Dean kept up with the changes in technology, from using the TI-99A to a Commodore 64 to a Windows PC. Dean is honored to have had a small part in the formidable work that Cary is doing to help educate people about keeping safe in the digital world in which we live. And that is the end of those. So let's go ahead and skip the preface and we'll get down to our first chapter. Chapter 1. Here Be Dragons. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details of securing your devices and your data, I want to help provide some motivation and set some expectations. In this chapter, I'll help you understand what your real risks are and how safe you can expect to be. Being that this is the first chapter, I'll take this opportunity to explain how this book is organized and help get the most out of it. Before you can solve any problem, you must first understand what the problem really is: the rules, goals, parameters, and context. When it comes to cybersecurity, we first need to know what it is we're trying to protect and who we are trying to protect it from. This is what we call the threat model. Remember this from the vocabulary yesterday? I know, I'm already throwing around some tech jargon, but I'm now going to explain that jargon in terms that will be easy to understand. I love to use analogies at times like these, and I find that you can explain a lot of aspects of computer security using the example of defending a medieval castle. You have people and valuables you would like to protect from various types of threats and perils. In the old days, people defended their stuff by erecting physical barriers like walls and moats, and sometimes even hired guards. It turns out that these concepts work well to describe computer security too. With that in mind, let's examine the fundamentals of computer security by comparing it to safeguarding a classic medieval stronghold. Next section. I dub thee. Congratulations! Your king, in his infinite wisdom and generosity, has granted you a lordship and given you huge tracts of land. You have been charged with populating and protecting this new territory, all the better to generate more tax revenue for your liege. To this end, you've been provided a fixed budget of gold and raw materials. Now what? What do you do? Well, the first thing you need to do is determine what and whom you need to protect. Obviously, you will need to protect yourself as well as your gold and other valuables. You will also need to protect the natural resources of your realm: farmlands, mines, quarries, forests, and sources of fresh water. You will want to control access to your realm, particularly the highways and waterways. The safety of the people within your realm is also paramount. This isn't just altruistic. Sure, you love your people, but they are also needed to farm the land, work the mines, create the goods, pay the taxes, and populate your army and personal guard. The next thing you need to determine is what and whom you need to protect your people and resources from. Unfortunately, the threats to your people and assets are many and varied. Footnote 1. I really wanted to say myriad and legion here, but that sounded a little too pretentious. But I thought it sounded really cool too, so I said it here. Now I've had my cake and eaten it too. Because what good is cake if you can't also eat it? Who buys cake with no expectation of ever consuming it? Never understood that expression. Not only do you need to consider malicious marauders and adversarial armies, but you also must be aware of feral fauna, perilous pestilence, and even crafty conmen. Oh my. It's also helpful to understand the resources of your opponent. That's true. I regularly buy cakes that I don't eat. Considering I cannot eat the glutens. Or bake cakes that I can't eat. It's also helpful to understand the resources of your opponent. Are they well funded? What types of weapons do they possess? What attack techniques do they employ? Last, but certainly not least, you need to understand the motivations of your attackers. Are they greedy or just hungry? Are they looking to make some sort of political or social statement? Do they have a reason to target you specifically? You have a vast realm, but only finite resources. You want to keep out the bad guys, but you must still allow for trade and travel. There are many possible attackers, but the risk of attack from each type of adversary is not the same. Likewise, while you have many strong types of people and assets to protect, let's face it, you're of the strong opinion that some are more important than others. You and your gold, for instance. In short, you will need to make some trade-offs. Security is always about trade-offs. But now we've done your threat analysis, and you have a much better idea of where to spend your limited resources. As a consumer with a finite budget, you also need to evaluate your threats and decide where to spend your time and money. Luckily for you, I've done most of that work for you in this book. It should be noted that if your attackers are much better funded than you are or have a lot more resources, you're pretty much screwed. For example, if the Russian mob or the National Security Agency, the NSA, specifically want to target you as an individual, you'd be hard-pressed to stop them. In our analogy, this would be like trying to defend your realm against a dragon. Aw, thank you so much for the follow, Incompetent Mietu. Milu. I've always struggled with the pronunciation of that word. Milu. I'm gonna look up a pronunciation. Enjoy your stand-up, Marcy. I'll see you soon. Milieu. Pronunciation.
Milieu.
Ah, I got it right that time. Ish. Welcome. Prior to Edward Snowden's shocking revelations in June 2013, I think that many people would have put the likelihood of mass warrantless surveillance on par with that of the existence of dragons. Something crazy people wearing tinfoil hats might have raved about, but surely wasn't commonplace. But rework the classic line from Catch-22, just because you're not paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. If our fictional lord believed that dragons were real and posed a potential threat to his people and his stuff, what could he reasonably do to defend against them? No wall could be built high enough to stop a flying beast. Regular weapons would be mostly useless against such a powerful magical creature. You could certainly try to construct some sort of domed fortress, an array of mighty dragon-sized weaponry. Hey, Analog! Welcome to stream. We are reading the very first chapter of Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons by Carrie Parker. And an array of mighty dragon-sized weaponry, but you'd probably go bankrupt in the process. Even if this could be done, how exactly would you test these defenses? As if that weren't enough, it might well be that the act of attempting to create such a worthy stronghold would actually attract the attention of the dragon. Why else would someone build such a fortress, unless they had something extremely valuable to protect, such as hoards of gold and jewels? No. The real hope of security in the face of such an adversary would be to hide in a deep, dark cave, strive to escape notice, and remain out of touch. But what sort of a life is that for your family and your subjects? The point of this book, and the inspiration for the title, is that you shouldn't be trying to defend yourself against dragons. Yeah, if the NSA is after you, you're not going to win. Good rule of thumb. You don't have a lot to protect compared with rich people or large corporations, and yet what you have is yours. And you would like to take some reasonable, cost-effective measures to safeguard your family and possessions. Think about your current residence. You probably have tens of thousands of dollars worth of stuff inside. Clothes, electronics, jewelry, furniture. But what stands between burglars and all this stuff? Probably a simple deadbolt that costs $25 at the hardware store. Could it be picked? Yes, without a doubt. You'd be surprised at how easily standard door locks can be picked. I learned how to do it in about 15 minutes. And yet, in most neighborhoods, this simple lock is enough. By the same token, your goal isn't to protect your computer and its contents from the Russian mob or the NSA. The only way you could hope to prevent that would be to go off the grid. Just in case you're curious, here's how that might work. First, buy a brand new laptop still sealed in shrink wrap from a big box store. Before you even power it up, open the laptop chassis and completely remove any hardware necessary for wireless communication, so the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth chips. Set up your new computer in a windowless basement. Line the walls and the ceiling of the basement with wire mesh or metal foil to block radio signals. Never, ever connect the laptop to the internet or any sort of peripheral device, such as a mouse, a printer, or anything with a USB plug. Now, how useful would that be? A computer that can't connect to the internet is almost useless these days. But even if you could live with all of this, these drastic security measures still wouldn't stop a law enforcement officer with a warrant or a burglar who breaks into your home. Don't forget to pay in cash. That's true. If you really need to protect yourself from this kind of threat, for example, if you're a political dissident, a corporate whistleblower, or just uber paranoid, then the advice in this book isn't going to be sufficient. And I don't intend it to be. The point here is that, statistically speaking, the Russian mob and the NSA are not likely to single out you specifically. For the average person, the most common threats are opportunistic hackers, automated attacks, and mass surveillance. That is, attacks that are general in nature, not targeted. For these threats, you can do quite a bit to protect yourself without spending a lot of time or money, and that is the focus of this book. 1 ounce of protection. An ounce of protection. I'm going to take a sip of my tea. So now that we've thoroughly examined our situation, what is our goal? How secure do we need to be? Another tried and true technique for solving a problem is to break it down into parts. Security generally has 3 phases: before, during, and after. more formally referred to as prevention, detection, and recovery. We also talked about this during vocab yesterday. Prevention is about trying to keep something bad from happening in the first place. Detection is about knowing definitively that something bad is happening right now, or just happened. And recovery is about repairing or mitigating the damage after the bad thing happens. Obviously, most people prefer to focus on prevention, so that detection and recovery will be unnecessary. But no security plan is complete without all three. Let's return to our newly minted lord and the defense of his realm. The most common defense mechanism in medieval times was the venerable castle. It's not practical to build a 75-foot-high wall around the entire realm, so a lord would build walls around the most important stuff. Castles were usually built on high hills to better monitor the surrounding countryside for incoming threats, and to put attacking armies at a disadvantage. Castles were built mostly to defend against people on foot or on horseback, but there were no airplanes, so you didn't need to protect yourself from the air. But the walls had to be high enough to stop attackers with ladders, arrows, and maybe stuff launched from catapults. In addition to walls, castles often had moats surrounding the walls to make it difficult for opposing armies to scale them. Hello, Sudu! Welcome! We are reading the very first chapter of Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, as according to our beautiful schedule. Where am I? Aha, here we go. Because people still needed to come and go, the walls required at least a few openings. You would fortify these openings with large wooden or iron gates, sometimes even multiple staggered sets of gates per opening. Armed guards, charged with evaluating who would be allowed to pass in either direction, would protect these openings. The walls and interior grounds were also patrolled by a different set of guards, who were charged with identifying and detaining bad people who might have somehow gotten through the outer defenses. Castles had defense in depth. That is, they didn't have just one mechanism for keeping out attackers. They had many. Each mechanism was different, not just because different attackers had different capabilities, but also to diversify the overall fortifications, in case an attacker found some clever way to neutralize one of the defenses. Some defenses were passive, like the walls and the moat. Once in place, they required little to no maintenance. Other defenses were active, like the castle guard. The guards could think for themselves, take orders, and evaluate and respond to individual threats on the fly. Once given comprehensive orders and training, though, even the guards could function pretty well on their own. It turns out that setting up defenses for your computer is similar in many ways to defending a castle. First, your main gate is your internet router. This is what separates you from the outside world, from both good people and bad. You need to have access to the outside world to get your water, food, and supplies, as well as to sell your goods, but you have to be careful not to let the really bad guys inside. Your router has a built-in mechanism for this called a firewall. Using the castle analogy, the firewall allows people from inside the castle grounds to get out and come back, but it prevents all foreigners from entering unless you say it's okay. That is, the firewall allows your computer to initiate connections to the internet, like Google.com, and knows to allow the recipient to reply to your request, like giving you back your search results. But if something on the internet tries to initiate contact with your computer, the connection is refused, or simply ignored, unless you've given it explicit instructions to allow the incoming request. By default, almost all external connections are refused by firewalls. An antivirus software is sort of like your armed guards. They actively watch your system for suspicious behavior, and if they find it, they try to stop it. Often, the AV software will then make you aware of the suspicious behavior and ask if you want to allow it. But if it's sure that it's found something bad, antivirus software will usually just go ahead and neutralize it for you. I'm going to have a note on antivirus software. Be aware that a lot of antivirus softwares, basically all antivirus softwares, actually increase the number of, using the castle analogy, the number of gates that are present, the number of doors that are present for your network. So the very presence of antivirus software on your network requires that you defend more openings to the outside world. So it in many cases is actually more risky to have antivirus software and makes you more likely to get viruses than not having it. Anyway, but not all threats to your computer come from the internet. Gaining physical, in-person access to your computer, while not as likely, is still a real threat. In this case, your castle walls are made of 2x4s and drywall. Your moat is just a well-lit yard with some thorny shrubbery in front of the windows. As long as your computer is inside your home or a place you trust, you're counting on the locked doors, solid walls, and other physical features to keep bad people away. However, if you have a laptop and you take it out of your home, you have a lot less physical protection, maybe a locked car or just a laptop bag. At that point, you are the best protection. Keeping the laptop with you in a bag, probably over your shoulder. For laptops, you really need to set a password on your computer so that if someone does manage to steal or gain physical access to it, they can't actually access your data. You should also encrypt your hard drive, particularly on laptops. There are sneaky ways to get the laptop data without having to log in, so encrypting the data on your drive will make that data useless if the attacker manages to circumvent the login process. This is defense in depth. You should have multiple layers of security for your computer and the data it contains. The more layers, the more secure you'll be. This book will help you add those layers. We won't spend a lot of time in this book on detection. Determining that your computer is actively being attacked or has recently been attacked is tricky to do. Thank you. That is a much better comparison. Sticking with the castle metaphor, the antivirus software vulnerability is more like giving a mercenary guard the authority to patrol inside your castle. That is an excellent comparison. Thank you. Antivirus software can help, but to do this right, you need more sophisticated software, like intrusion detection systems. Intrusion detection systems have elements that are similar to firewalls, but whereas firewalls are generally used to prevent intrusion in the first place, an IDS will manage background activities and communications on a computer for signs that the attackers have already gotten in and are trying to do bad things. Most intrusion detection systems are marketed towards owners of large public servers. In our analogy, castle guards are charged with monitoring the people moving around within the walls, looking for suspicious behavior and illicit communications with outside agents. When intruders are identified, alarms are sounded, and the rest of the guard is put on high alert until all threats have been identified and neutralized. If guards at the gates are like antivirus software, then the elite castle guards roaming the interior grounds are more like an intrusion detection system. The two functions are similar, but they differ in scope and complexity. The role of detection is quite important in other areas that we see every day. For example, the sealing wrappers and pop-up lids on food products are there to tell you whether a jar or bottle has already been opened. The paper or foil seals covering the openings of over-the-counter medicine were implemented as a direct result of the Tylenol murders in Chicago in the early 1980s. The seal is not there to prevent tampering, but to make tampering evident. If you see the seal has been broken, you know someone has been messing around with it, and therefore you shouldn't use it. In the old days, wax seals were used to secure important letters. Not to prevent them from being opened, but to make it obvious if someone had opened a letter prior to the intended recipient. Despite your best efforts, you may not be able to prevent all attacks, so you need to have a plan for handling the case when something bad does happen. In some cases, if you know that your security has been compromised, you can take steps to mitigate the impact after the fact. You can run malware removal tools, change your passwords, close your accounts, or remotely wipe your data in the case of a stolen computer or device. We'll discuss all these in this book. So, to summarize, our primary goal is to prevent bad things from happening in the first place. And because security is never absolute, our secondary goal must be to prepare ourselves to respond if something ever gets past our defenses. So, next section. How worried should I be? How worried should I be? I'd say people fall into about 3 camps when it comes to worrying about computer software. There's a large group of people who are blissfully ignorant. They like their computers and gadgets, but don't give a lot of thought to security. Let's call this camp Pollyanna. In my experience, people in this camp tend to be younger. Acknowledging the importance of recovery here is something that you rarely see in cybersecurity texts. Agreed. That is actually part of why I picked this book. They actually talk about creating solid recovery plans. In my experience, people in this camp tend to be younger. They've grown up with computers and smartphones. These devices are an integral part of their lives, and they can't imagine being without them. They probably haven't had anything bad happen to them, and they feel safe enough. They're almost surely not. There's another camp of people who are intimidated by computers and online life in general. They refuse to shop or bank online, but maybe they send some emails, surf the web to look something up, and dabble in Facebook. This would be more like Camp Luddite. Footnote 2. This term comes from a group of English workers in the early 1800s who destroyed the newfangled textile manufacturing equipment because they felt it was threatening their livelihoods. A Luddite is someone who shuns new technology. In my experience, the folks in this camp tend to be older. They didn't grow up with computers and can live just fine without them. But in today's world, computers are everywhere. We can no more avoid them than we can avoid horseless carriages. Oh, but it's a car. Got it. We're moving really slow. My brain is clicking at quarter speed today. Then, there's a small camp of folks who understand the likely risks, take proper precautions, and proceed confidently with a wary respect for the dangers. I like to call this Camp Goldilocks. Not too scared, not too indifferent, just cautiously confident. The goal of this book is to bring everyone into that camp. As I alluded to earlier, the threats that most people need to worry about in the virtual world are mostly environmental or indiscriminate. In the real world, this is akin to random crime and general misinformation. What are your odds of having your house broken into or being injured in a car accident? It depends on where you live and how you drive, certainly, but it's still somewhat arbitrary. But you can always take precautions. Thank you so much for the follow, Adverse Par. But you can always take precautions that will lower your odds and mitigate your losses. We wear a seatbelt and maybe spend a little extra money for a car with lots of airbags. We lock our house when we leave and maybe even install security cameras. These are inconveniences we've decided to live with and costs we've decided we're willing to pay. Despite the fact that computers and even the internet has been around for decades now, we still haven't really gotten used to thinking about virtual threats like we do physical threats. This is partially because we, as humans, don't have the senses that work in the virtual world. Unlike physical objects in the real world, what computers do and how they interact is often not directly perceivable. A networked computer is an amazingly powerful tool, but just like any tool, it can be used for good and for ill. We shouldn't shun the tool just because we don't understand it, but we also need to learn how to use it properly so we don't endanger ourselves or others. Automobiles can be lethally dangerous, but the benefits of mobility are undeniably worth the risks. However, Though we are carefully trained and licensed before being allowed... I have stories about my driving test. Did you know that you do not have to pass any of the parking section of your driving test to be able to get your license in some states? I can park now, I promise. It's been like a decade. We're good now, but good God, carefully trained and licensed. Yep, definitely in this country. There is no permit required for the surfing on... Hey! He talks about that. Next chapter. We're getting there. We shouldn't shun the tool just because we don't understand it, but we also need to learn how to use it properly so we don't endanger ourselves or others. However, though we are carefully trained and licensed before being allowed to drive on the highway, there is no permit required for the surfing on the information superhighway. Furthermore, the dangers of piloting a 3,000-pound metal box at 70 miles per hour are readily apparent to the driver. But the dangers of surfing the net are not intuitively obvious. People just don't have an instinctual feel for the risks. Speaking of, I think that I've seen someone on TikTok talking about this as well, but it makes me so mad that Microsoft in their new start menu has started conflating searching the internet and searching your computer. My grandfather is not a technically savvy man. He needs help to search the internet because he gets viruses all the time. He will download things. And it makes me so mad that we are starting to obfuscate where your device ends and where the internet begins. It's very dangerous for people who are not particularly informed about how technology works. You think that cars have been overly normalized in that sense because a lot of drivers don't seem to understand the dangers of driving. Yeah, that is also a thing. Some people definitely do. Some people do not. In the physical world, we've developed senses to help keep us safe. We smell smoke. Yeah, I fucking hate Spotlight. It irritates the crap out of me as a Mac user. Sorry for the language. In the physical world, we've developed senses that help keep us safe. We smell smoke. We hear footsteps coming up behind us. We see a rustle in the bushes. We taste something that is going rotten, or we feel something that is radiating heat. We don't have similar senses for the virtual world. Before computers were connected to the internet, this lack of senses didn't matter as much. If you had computer problems, they were probably caused by you and affected only you. Today, our computers are connected 24/7. A security lapse by one person can have perilous effects on many others. The advent of the internet is to computer viruses what the emergence of air travel was to human viruses. Viruses went from a local concern to a global concern. Unfortunately, we're now all too familiar with the global pandemic. That leads to a very important conclusion. Your security affects my security too. If your network gets hacked or your computer is infected by a virus, hey Watson, welcome to stream. We are reading the first chapter of Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. That leads to a very important conclusion. Your security affects my security too. If your network gets hacked or your computer is infected by a virus, the other devices you interact with are now in danger as well. But this can also work in our favor. I'll come back to that at the end of this chapter. So to answer the original question, I'm not going to lie. You definitely have plenty to worry about. Like the Lord in our analogy, your threats are many and varied. I'll enumerate the main ones in the next section. But know that most of the threats are avoidable, and most of the risks can be significantly mitigated. Just briefly stopping by between your streams. Aw! Well, thank you for stopping by to say hi. Welcome to stick around as long as you'd like. And welcome to dip off whenever you need to start your next stream. Maybe I'll be able to catch some of yours as well, depending on how long this chapter goes. But know that most of the threats are avoidable, and most of the risks can be significantly mitigated. The main goal of this book is to help you do those things. I like to say that you should be more wary than worried. Enjoy your lurk, Analog. But I also want you to learn enough about how computers and the internet work so that you can start to develop your own cyber instincts and senses. Arthur C. Clarke once said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. This stuff isn't magic. It's knowable and even predictable. With a little education, you can make better decisions and avoid bad outcomes. By understanding some fundamental concepts, you can adapt the suggestions in this book for your particular situation, and even extrapolate beyond the specifics of this book when the situation requires it. So, next section. What should I be worried about? Throughout the course of this book, I'll talk about individual threats more specifically. But for now, I'll give you my list of what I consider to be the most impactful threats of today. There are two key aspects to any given threat. What's the probability of it occurring, and how dire are the consequences if it does happen? I'm going to roll those two things up together here. So, number 1, bank card fraud. People worry a lot about their credit card information being stolen online, but in reality, this is probably one of the least scary scenarios. Why? Well, as long as you report the fraudulent charges in a timely manner, you won't be responsible for them. Sure, you might have to get a new credit card, which is annoying, but you haven't actually lost any money. It shouldn't even affect your credit score. The credit card companies have insurance, and they charge all sorts of fees to cover losses like this. They're also getting really good at spotting suspicious activity. They will probably catch the bad charges before you do. So while credit card fraud is a real problem for credit card companies, it's really not a major problem for card holders. Debit card fraud, on the other hand, can be extremely impactful. Charges and withdrawals via debit card immediately remove funds from your account. Number 2, spam and scams. Also from our vocabulary yesterday. The internet is a con artist's dream come true. You no longer have to find and meet your marks one at a time. You can reach millions of gullible people for almost zero cost and almost zero risk via email or text message. I've seen estimates that almost 85% of emails are junk or spam. Oh, this is cool. Yeah. I'm going to open this one. So let's see. This is estimates of email traffic happening. This is estimates of spam traffic happening. That's a staggering figure. And I'll go ahead and drop that link so that y'all can poke around at it while you're listening if you feel so inclined. No, just give me the... Thank you. Oh, wait, I forgot to actually copy. Paste. Oh, no, it's just not pasting. Oh, there we go. Okay. The list of scams is long and limited only by the perpetrator's imagination. They will use social engineering techniques to capture your interest and play on your emotions. Guilt, shame, fear, even generosity. It's a classic tale, just told via a new medium. Oh, I forgot to read this section. Junk mail filters now catch almost all of these emails, and most of the rest are rightly ignored and deleted. Text message spam filters aren't very good, at least not yet. But if I can send 1 million messages for almost no cost and and only 1% of these messages are read, I've still reached 10,000 people. The math is just not in our favor. Number 3, phishing. Unfortunately, this has nothing to do with a rod and reel and a whistling theme to the Andy Griffith Show. Phishing is a technique used by scammers to extract sensitive information from people by pretending to be someone else, usually via email or text message. Basically, they trick you into thinking you're dealing with your bank, PayPal, Apple, eBay, Amazon, or even the government, particularly the IRS. Sometimes they entice you with good stuff, like winning a prize, giving away free stuff, or a special opportunity. Sometimes they scare you away with bad stuff, such as locking your account, reporting you to some authority, or warning you of an account breach. But in all cases, they try to compel you to give up information, such as login credentials or credit card numbers. Next one, malware. Emails and text messages are often used to lure unsuspecting people to fake and/or malicious websites. These websites can use bugs in your web browser to surreptitiously download malicious software, which is called malware, onto your computer. Or they might try to convince you to download and install a phony plugin or software update or even a fake virus scanner. Sometimes the message has infected files or applications directly attached that are laced with malware. Malware can be used to steal information, cause senseless harm to your computer or data, or make your computer a slave in a robot army to wage war on some third party. That sounds like a science fiction story, but it's very, very real. Next one, identity theft. When someone uses your information to impersonate you for the purpose of gaining access to your money or your credit or benefits like healthcare, this is called identity theft or identity fraud. This is probably the most serious threat for the average person. If someone can successfully pretend to be you to your bank or credit card company, they can drain your bank accounts, open loans in your name, or run up huge bills on your card. Now you have to convince the bank and the credit agencies that it wasn't really you and that you weren't somehow negligent in allowing for it to happen. If you're lucky enough to get your money back and get the debt waived, you may still have a big black mark on your credit history. Email hacking. While it's obvious why criminals would want to target your bank accounts, it might surprise you how lucrative it can be to hack into someone's email account. When you forget your password, how do you recover it? The most common method by far today is via email. If a crook can gain access to your email account, they can use an automated password reset service on your bank webpage to change your password, locking you out and giving them full access, all in one full swoop. Furthermore, they can use your email to get money out of your friends and family. One of the more popular scams is to email everyone in your contact list and tell them that you're stranded somewhere. Your wallet, passport, and cell phone have been stolen, and you need emergency money wired right away. If you got this email from someone you didn't know, you would surely ignore it. But if you got it directly from your son, your best friend, or your mother, maybe even a reply to an earlier email from them, you could very well be duped into believing it was real. Finally, tracking and surveillance. We freely give away all sorts of information in return for free services, and we collectively shrug when whistleblowers reveal astonishing levels of surveillance on the entire population by our governments. Our online activities are being tracked at unbelievable levels today. Personal information is gold to advertisers, and they have built massive profiles on each one of us. Thus, this data is used to target you with ads, but is also sold to whoever is willing to pay, including the government. This has profound risks, which I will talk about in the next chapter. Okay, next section. Indirect threats. So far, we've only discussed direct threats. Bad guys targeting individuals, even if they sometimes do it on a massive scale, as with spam. While some crooks prefer to mug a series of people in dark alleys, more ambitious thieves might prefer to rob just one bank vault and be done with it. It's the classic risk versus reward trade-off. Welcome back. I am glad that the will-o'-wisps have returned you to us. While we've got centuries to figure out how to properly protect physical assets like jewels, gold, and cash, we're still trying to figure out how to best protect our digital assets. Gotcha. Ooh, I should do laundry today. That's a good idea. That we doesn't refer to just you and me. It also refers to large corporations. It seems like nary a month goes by now without hearing about another massive security breach at a brand name company. The theft of financial details of 100 million Capital One users. The colossal breach of Equifax that divulged gobs of personal and financial data. And the realization that Facebook overshared the data of tens of millions of users with Cambridge Analytica. While those were high-profile breaches that made headlines, there were many others that didn't make the nightly news, either because they were smaller and escaped notice by the mainstream media, or because the companies just kept the breaches quiet. Yep, this version was published in 2020. Originally, the book was written in 2014, I think. And this is the 5th edition. As regular consumers, we can't do anything to improve the security of these corporate servers. However, there is a lot we can do to mitigate the impacts of these now inevitable breaches. For example, bad guys know that people reuse the same password on multiple sites. If they can get your password from somesite.com, they will immediately try that same password on several other popular websites. This is called credential stuffing, and the bad guys have this process completely automated today. So just by using unique passwords for each website, we have prevented credential stuffing attacks. Finally, a few final thoughts before we begin. I have a few more points and provisos that I want to put out there, and then we can go through some of the logistical and housekeeping stuff. First of all, don't panic. Bonus pop culture points to anyone who immediately verified the location of their towel. Out of necessity, this book is going to be focused on all the things that could go wrong. It's like your sex ed class in high school. They spent a lot of time warning you about all the bad things that could happen. The good parts were taken for granted. Armed with the knowledge and simple precautions outlined in this book, you will be a card-carrying member of Camp Goldilocks. The good news, when it comes to cybersecurity, is that there are many simple and affordable things you can do to significantly reduce your risks, and that's the whole point of this book. Second, taking steps to protect yourself will also increase the security of those around you, even if they don't read this book. If your computer or online accounts are compromised, they can be used to compromise others, particularly those with whom you are connected directly. When you leave yourself vulnerable, you're not just risking your own safety. You're risking the safety of others as well. Conversely, protecting yourself will also help protect your friends and family. If enough people take these basic precautions, we can even develop a sort of herd immunity in the cyber world. I do need to throw in a few caveats too. First, I promise that this book would make you safer, and that if you do even some of the things I recommend, it will absolutely do that. But note that I did not say that it would make you safe. The topic of security is unbelievably vast, and the playing field is changing constantly. One book could not possibly cover every possible threat, and that wasn't my intent. There are so many small and simple things that everyone can do to mitigate most risks, and most people just don't know about them, or don't understand how important they are. Those are the things I want to cover in this book. Also, security is never absolute. Take a look at the NSA. You'd think they'd be secure, it's right there in the name, but they were still beaten by one guy, Edward Snowden. It's not about being 100% secure. That's impossible. It's about being secure enough. As the saying goes, you don't need to outrun the bear, you just need to outrun the other guy. However, when it comes to computer security, most people have honestly done little or nothing to protect themselves. With this book, I will give you many simple, reasonable steps that you can use to protect yourself. I'll even tell you some of the more arcane things you can do if you really want to kick it up a notch. Second, convenience is usually the enemy of security. That is, the more convenient something is, the less secure it probably is. Therefore, increasing your personal security is going to decrease your personal convenience and probably make your life more complicated than it is now. That's the hard truth of the matter. We're used to the inconveniences of real-world security. Having to lock your house and your car all the time is inconvenient, but these simple precautions are a fact of modern life, and most of us don't give them a second thought. Having an ID to cash a check and having to enter a PIN to withdraw money from an ATM are things we're used to doing. However, computer security is another story entirely. Most people are not used to doing the things that they really should be doing. And therefore, some of the things that I'll recommend in this book are gonna seem really inconvenient at first. Give them a try. You might be surprised how quickly you get used to doing them. And finally, I know a lot about security and privacy, but I'm not infallible, nor am I free from bias. I have many colleagues in this arena, and it's not uncommon for us to disagree amongst ourselves on specific solutions to specific situations. It's just the nature of the beast. So I encourage you to seek out information from other sources, and I will point you to several good ones throughout the book. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's help you get the most out of this book. And I don't want to read this section because I'm kind of guiding you through this course. You're not using this book as a course in and of itself, so no need to read that. Only thing that I will point out to those who are following along with the book at home, which if you want links to where you can buy the book, you can find them in my Discord, is they do have a set of like recommended things to do at the end. So they have the chapter, they have a summary of the chapter, just in bullet points, has some recommendations of additional resources that you can read if you so want to, and then it gives you a checklist of things that you should do. For this particular chapter, it says figure out what your operating system is on your phone and your computer. If you do not know that, it is useful when you are like, you're going to do different things on different devices. So figure out the version of your operating system. And that is it for today. We are clocking in at about an hour, and I desperately need to go take some ibuprofen for my joints, and maybe take a nap. I'm sorry, says Eos. I have figured out my issue with the YouTube uploads. So there will be, the VOD of this one is obviously going to be available right here, here on Twitch. But I will also be uploading yesterday's stream and tomorrow's stream to a YouTube channel in the next couple days. Aim is to upload the one from yesterday today, and the one from today tomorrow is my target. So sorry to have missed you, friend. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Sorry that the stream is a little short. Again, just it's been a time. So I'm gonna go try to get more than 2 hours of sleep. And y'all take care. Bye.